Right, welcome to this next Delphi tutorial. Now, in the last one we did have a basic look at variables. So let's expand on this in our programming knowledge. I've just created a new console application, and I'm going to have a variable, and I'm going to call it num1. And this time I'm not going to set it to string, I'm going to set it to an integer. Now, an integer can hold any whole number, i.e. 71 or 27 or 151, anything like that. It cannot hold anything with a decimal place like 7.6, and it cannot hold strings either. Now I'm going to actually show you how you can actually use an integer variable in a little program. We're actually going to use a command called readLn. Now, normally you'll have seen readLn with a semicolon on the end to pause the display. But before the semicolon, if you put an open and close bracket, and then we're going to put in num1, which is this variable here, it will actually allow the user to enter a number, and whatever the user enters will then be stored in num1. And then I'm going to just write ln num1 out like that, and then I'm going to have a readLn to pause the display. There we go. And now if I enter 60, it'll output 60 again because it's outputting the number that I saved. But what I want it to do is I want it to actually ask me to enter a number. So I'm just going to use write, not write-ln, because I don't want it to move into the I don't want the cursor to move into the next line. So write, enter a number, put a space in, finish it off, and now it'll ask me to enter a number. As you can see, enter a number, 50, and then it'll re-output it. Now, I did also mention in the last one that you could use strings to save numbers, but you couldn't multiply the variables, and this is what I'm going to actually give an example of. We've just here on this line here, we've just got num1 entered, and the user's whatever you put in will be num1. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get num1, and I'm going to go num1 becomes num1 multiplied by 5, semicolon on the end. Now if I enter a number like 5, there you go, it'll output 25. Now that is what I mean when I say you can actually use integers to multiply, so you can actually get your equations going. But as I said, you can't have a decimal place. Well, to solve that you want to just have a real instead of an integer under your variable. And so this time I could actually enter 6.5. As you can see, I've just entered 6.5 and it's come up with 3.2500 and so on, which is not pretty. We'll learn later on how to tidy that up. But as you can see, you can use a real. But you may just ask, well, why don't I just use a real all the time? Well, the reason is a real uses up a lot more memory than an integer does. And programming, a good programmer tries to save as much memory as possible. And it doesn't really matter as much now because of the amount of memory that computers have, but when computers were first starting off, they had limited memory. And it's very good if you actually do not just use reals for everything, and you actually conserve memory by using the proper actual variable types. If you just want to store an integer with a whole number with no decimal places, just have an integer, don't use real unnecessarily. Now again, that's it for this one. Hope you found it useful, and in the next one we'll actually look at structuring the program and making it a bit easier to understand, and also we'll have a look at not pseudocode, we'll have a look at annotations.